It's lovely to see so many familiar names popping up in my participants list, and great to be joined by a couple of supremely excellent and insightful guests for this evening's somewhat preposterous predictions thinking, where we try and put our heads together to figure out what we think is going to happen over the next 12 months. We were all feeling a bit loosey-goosey and relaxed before Christmas, and we made a little video where we compiled all the things we said in last January's predictions thinking, and how many we were right about and how many we were wrong about. We're all a bit ashamed of it now in the cold January, so we're not going to play that again tonight, but if you'd like to see it, you can see it, I believe, on the Tortoise website. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Moseley. I'm an editor here at Tortoise, and the job of this evening, as I say, is to come up with what we think is going to happen next. We've had a think, Penny and Marie have had a think, but we're very, very interested in what you think too. So if you think we're wrong, please say so. If you want to suggest an alternative, politics, sport, anything really, anywhere in the world, we're very keen to hear, and we're going to capture them all. And then, as we said we would, because we are a responsible newsroom, we will check our homework at the end of the year and share it with you to see if we were anywhere near right. Without further ado, I'm going to start with James Harding, just because he's the boss man and he sent me some predictions, and also because, James, as you know, in your year-end review, we gave you the feedback that you must try and be more fun. And congratulations, your predictions are, I would say, moderately fun.
Oh, that is kind of you. I thought they were much too boring. That's really kind of you. All right, so mine are, by the way, I read something about predictions, which is the most stupid thing you can do, which is what I'm about to do, is kind of tack X onto Y onto Z. If you make very, very simple predictions, that's the most likely ones to be right. So mine and none of these are going to work. One, by the end of 2022, Boris Johnson will no longer be Prime Minister of the UK. Prediction two, by the end of 2022, Meghan Markle will have made a visit to Iowa, but denied that she's exploring a presidential run. In brackets, 2 to 3 Democrats will be unable to deny that they're making a presidential bid against Joe Biden because they are. 3, boringly but importantly, President Erdogan of Turkey will have made clear that he's not running in 2023, and a long period of his rule is going to be coming to an end. 4, the government, despite a lot of pressure from essentially people in coffee shops, will announce that it is going to privatize Channel 4. And, oh yes, the one that I announced last year, which is that Apple is going to launch its big new thing, bigger than the earbuds, the glasses. It's a rollover. That's my rollover prediction from 2021.
I don't know if you're allowed a rollover, but I want to, so let's talk about Meghan. I know that Penny also wants to talk about American politics, and we'll definitely come back to it. So take us through the thinking on that.
So I think the serious bit of it is that Joe Biden thinks that he's running again in 2024, but after the midterms, it'll be clear that Democrats will have to challenge him. This has not happened in a long time for a sitting president to be under pressure from members of his own party, but that will happen. And I don't think that Kamala Harris looks more likely to get that nomination, and she looks less and more vulnerable. So the game's open. But the debate will be who could beat Trump, and it would be a name. And so there will be people around Meghan. In fact, there are people around Meghan who've, well, I'm saying that as if I know who knows what on earth goes on in the kind of outer reaches of our royal family. But the, well, actually, Penny might know, but I mean, I definitely don't know. Yeah, exactly. That's, I'm hoping she does, but I don't know. But yes, I think you'll see a trip to Iowa, one of those kind of political moments that people are saying, what's she doing here? And it will be a sounding out that will be denied.
Interesting. Well, we've already got plenty of people joining in with agreeing, tweaks, disagreeing, and so on. I do want to come as soon as I can to Penny. We've just mentioned her. Penny Thornton, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, is an astrologer and an author, and has been in the astrology game. It's not really a game. I mean, that's part of the whole thing that we were just talking about, Penny, for many, many years. And we've laughed a little bit, to be honest with you, about last year when we were doing the predictions thing. We think maybe we'll get an astrologer in, and we were sort of, it's like, oh, that'll be fun and hilarious and all the rest of it. And then when Mark arranged to bring you on this year, it's also sort of slightly different vibe. Tell us about how it works, astrology, for those people watching, and I think there may be some who are a bit like, are you joking, an astrologer?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that, but the first thing I want to say is that I agree with James about Boris. I don't think Boris will be Prime Minister by the end of the year. Okay. And I also think, and we'll come to that later, there's a lot of unrest, and there's going to be a lot of changes at the midterm elections, of which Joe Biden, I believe, is definitely part. So I agree with him on that point too. Okay. So
how does it work? Tell us the sort of few sentence version.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know, there is no scientific basis for astrology. You can't say the mechanism is this, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a framework. And it has a very big, complicated framework that's been going for thousands of years, but it is continually tweaked and built on according to the times we live in. And I think, very simply put, if you move right away from the idea of the little newspaper columns and magazine columns that you read, and they give you a little soundbite about if you're Aries or Taurus, that has absolutely nothing to do with real astrology. And the work that I do, and lots of other astrologers like myself, we're usually very interested in what's going on in the world, not just in our clients' lives or, you know, our lives. And what we look at really are the cycles of the planets, and these cycles are predictable. You know, the Pluto moves around the sun in 248 years, that's its cycle. And Saturn takes 29 years to move around. So if all these planets are taking a definite kind of time to do their orbits, they're continually having relationships with each other. And so it's these cycles we look at. And in a very simple way, we sort of pick up the mood music of what they are. And then we have a look at what's ahead of us in real life. And we think, how's this going to work out? And what did this mean when I last saw it in 1517? What did it mean? How does it now translate in 2022? So we're really looking at cycles and history and the things that we have understood over the millennia almost about what astrology, what planets, how these things work, and making them, you know, relevant today. I mean, for astrology to be relevant, it's got to be current, and that's what I do.
You're sort of looking for patterns, and I sort of had a bit of an analogy before we went live. I was, you know, Matt Mcconaughey has been, I mean, lurking, but in a nice way, around the sort of corridors of power for the best part of 30 years, and has seen patterns and understood dynamics, and, you know, that's his system to use, and relationships and all the rest of it, inside knowledge, to decide to predict, if you like, what will or won't happen to, let's say, Boris Johnson. And you're in a sort of similar, looking for patterns, drawing on past experiences, but you're reaching back 400 years and beyond, rather than sort of, yeah. Okay,
and I think we've got a real parallel with people who look at the financial, the money market, who are busy looking at trends. They're looking at cycles and sine waves and all sorts of things that predict the way something may go. Of course, it's open to interpretation, the same as astrology, but it's similar. And I think people need to understand that, rather than think it's all voodoo and, you know, ooh, it's not. It's really quite, it's brain work. You know?
So Penny, you've sort of mentioned briefly that you agree with James that 2022 is not a good year for Boris Johnson, not a good year for Joe Biden. And Prince Andrew was another one that you wrote a sort of relatively detailed last week sort of set of observations, predictions. Just talk to us about where that is going to go next, and how you know where it's come from.
You mean with Prince Andrew in
Yeah.
relation? Yeah. Well, I have thought about Prince Andrew and thought that 2022 for him is his annus horribilis. There's no question about it. And, you know, at the moment, we're waiting to see whether Judge Lewis Kaplan will say the trial must go forward or whether the case is dismissed. My particular point of view is it's almost irrelevant whether that case goes forward or it doesn't, because things for Andrew are going to be absolutely terrible this year. There is not a period in which there is sort of joy and celebration. I mean, maybe a couple of days here and there, but mainly it's very, very gloomy. And in a way, it's a great awakening for Andrew. And I don't want to get too technical here, but he's got something in his chart that has a lot to do with losing your birthright. So I think the potential here is not that he will lose some, if not all, of his titles, whether or not this case goes to court or not. But clearly it's going to be considerably worse if he does. And I think the extension of this is what's happening to the monarchy. And this indeed is another terrible year for the monarchy as a whole. And it's sad because it's the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. And we really want to celebrate our wonderful monarch and all her years of service and how much she is what makes Britain great. But you're looking at patterns that look quite the reverse. And I think we have some very, very difficult events to come in the monarchy. And, you know, that's going to sour this celebratory year, really.
Yeah, thank you very much, Penny. We will come back to you. I wish I had confidently made the prediction at the beginning of the ThinkIn that Katie Bannock-Smith would at some point put in the chat, bloody love the Queen, because she always does. And indeed she has, but I didn't say it out loud. I thought it to myself, which doesn't count. Let's get into this British politics thing. Marie Leconte, hello, lovely to see you. Happy New Year. Marie Leconte, for those of you who don't know, is French-Moroccan political journalist, it says on my briefing document. So we'll talk about France in a sec, but let's do British politics to begin with. Are you on board with James and Penny that we're going to have no more Prime Minister Johnson by the end of the year?
Yes, well, I'm slightly annoyed that everyone said it before me, because that was going to be my main thing. But yes, no, I completely agree. So I think the local elections in May are going to go very badly. And I would say, if I were to put a finer point on it, that's probably when Conservative MPs will make a move and try and remove Boris. Though that being said, and I find that quite striking, which is that I put that theory to a Conservative MP recently who said, actually, I'm not even sure people will wait that long, so it may even happen before the locals, although I sort of doubt it. But yeah, I think the slight sort of like extra prediction I will make, which is probably a slightly spicier one, is that I'm not actually entirely convinced there's going to be Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, because, you know, and I think we forget because Boris is Boris, and I think the last leadership contest was a bit different. That actually, you know, it is not normally a good thing to be the front runner before a leadership contest even happens, or even the second front runner, really. So I wonder if it may not end up being someone else. And even talking to Tories at the moment, quite a lot of them are not sort of like overly fond of Liz Truss or overly fond of Rishi Sunak. So I wonder if we may not end up with having someone else kind of coming out of nowhere, seemingly, over the next few months, or starting to, like, you know, make the calls, and then for that person to be our next Prime Minister.
So Liz Truss may have mistimed her run because it's the fun predictions thinking, Marie. Who? Meg will go?
I would definitely not go. No, maybe someone. I don't really know. Not. I think Penny Mordaunt. You know what? Fine. If I am to just pick a random name, because I think, you know, she is someone who is, I think, quite well liked in the party. She's a woman. She was a Brexiteer. Like, she campaigned for vote leave, so I think that would be palatable to Tory members and now the majority of the parliamentary party. So yeah. Were I to just throw a name kind of at random for the fun of it, I would say Penny Mordaunt will be the next Prime Minister.
Goodness me, I'm looking forward to the edit at the end of the year with how we put all of these things together. Let's bring in maybe Matt and Giles. Matt Dancona and Giles retired, then I'm going to bring in some members as well. I can't not go to Matt when we're talking about everybody's in agreement, no more Mr. Johnson. Thoughts? Oh, you're on mute, Matt. Hang on. Wait a minute. No. Oh dear. Yes. Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry about that. I'm going to go for the boringly conservative prediction about the Conservative Party, which is I think that they're all a bunch of lame ass morons, really. And in the end, they won't ditch a prime minister sitting on a 79-seat majority, partly because, as the discussion has already illustrated, there isn't actually a big beast waiting. There's a pretend big beast in Rishi Sunak, which is just silly. And there's a slightly deranged big beast in Liz Truss, which is even sillier. And then there's a kind of list of about 100 people, all of whom want to be prime minister, ranging from Jeremy Hunt to Dominic Raab to Basil Brush. You know, it just, the list goes on. Johnson is horribly wounded. You know, the government's in a shambles, but they don't have an alternative. And actually, they don't really have an appeal there because they've submitted so badly to the idea that politics is show business that they don't have a star to put in the main role. There's no great Tory idea anymore now that Brexit's sort of in the rearview mirror, at least as a campaigning concept. So I think they'll stick with him, which is not to say they should, but I think at Christmas he'll still be just prime minister.
Interesting. Let's have a listen. Let's just bring in Samantha Fionder and maybe after that Anushka. Are you there, Samantha? Because you had a different suggestion for who might step in. Samantha Fionder, are you there? Hi, nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You've both gone with an alternative suggestion, a Tobias or a Tom?
Sorry, say again?
Tobias Elwood or a Tom Tugendhat?
I just think that the public might be attracted to some people who've been making more sort of level-headed comments over the last 2 years. Also how they reacted to what happened with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I think also the public respond well to potentially ex-military people in terms of leadership positions, and also where those two individuals, but also people like them, have been working within the parliament on committees and so on. So I wouldn't be surprised if they would throw their hats in the ring. But
it's an interesting suggestion, and Tugendhat particularly had a number of sort of successful big platform media opportunities, and he's sort of the opposite of a Johnson in some ways. It sort of brings calmness and credibility. I mean, I sound a bit strong and sable when I say that. I don't mean to, but I can see where you're coming from with that suggestion. I just don't know if they've got the profile or would be able to sort of garner the support that you would need to sort of suddenly be the person.
I think it I'm muted.
Let's unmute Samantha if we can. Oh no. I don't know, she's gone.
I'm here.
Yeah.
But yes, I was being muted. I don't know. I think it depends what kind of contest it is. And I also think that the Prime Minister probably won't go until he wants to. I think there are things that he wants to do and things that he never anticipated he would have to attend to, because obviously nobody saw the pandemic coming. So this is not the job that I think that he thought he was probably going to be doing in the way that he wanted to do it.
Yeah. Thanks so much. There's some sort of, based on Tortoise members voting by dint of happy comments in the chat, that I think Tugendhat's got it in the bag. So maybe that is one to watch. Let's talk about America. Oh God, Marie, you've got your hand up.
And I was just going to say quickly, I think Matt has already put that in the chat. I don't see a world, if I'm honest. Well, I see a world where Tom Tugendhat can definitely stand for Conservative leader, but he's a half French man from a very posh background who was very Remainy. But there's just, have you seen the Parliamentary Conservative Party recently? Like, I don't think, I'm sure he could run and and have some interesting ideas, obviously, and widen the debate. But I don't, I will cut off my hand if Tom Tugendhat is the next Conservative Prime Minister.
Marie, I've just noticed a comment from David Wood in the chat, which is a good question, and because it's a sort of slightly light-hearted thinking that we're talking about, who will be at the top, and that's the sort of bitey, snipey, sexy bit. But I wonder if, because COVID has dominated so much for 2 years, really, and Matt has said a number of times, for as long as COVID dominates the news agenda, Boris is probably okay. Could the sort of fallout from Brexit, not ideal that it has been, could that, do you think that is really going to come back to the top of the headlines? The sort of Northern Ireland decline in trade, the cost of living crisis, and the extent to which that is or isn't a Brexit related thing. Do you think that is something that's going to really bite this year?
I'm not massively sure, because I think the problem, if you look, most of the newspapers were Brexit supporting, like the kind of high readership newspapers, so they're not really going to make that point, I think. So it's up to the Labour Party really, but then the Labour Party is also trying to, obviously a lot of its electoral coalition is Brexit voters, so it's probably not going to want to piss them off too much. So I think in an ideal world, sure, but I don't really see who, like, you would need effectively someone probably making that case again and again, because as you pointed out, I think because of the timing and the pandemic, it's not immediately obvious what was caused by the global pandemic or by Brexit. And so you would need someone day in, day out to make that case and explain it to people. And I just don't really see who that is, if I'm honest.
Yeah, or who would have the patience to listen to it. There's Tom Schuller is making a very good point, because of course the spectre of Farage also now re-emerging stage left. Well, it actually would be stage right, wouldn't it, if it was Nigel Farage? Matt, is that a real thing or a non-thing?
It's a real thing. I mean, Farage is the political equivalent of lost luggage or herpes. You just never get rid of him. And he comes back in differently. So what's interesting about him is he's totally fireproof to the mockery of what he would call the liberal elite. He just keeps coming back. And I've been very surprised, I must confess, by how much public profile he still has now that, as it were, Brexit is though it still rumbles on as a problem, it's in the rearview mirror. He remains very popular, and he's clearly thinking about taking over Reform UK again, which would be the third party he's led. And he's a constant source of problems, because he does Boris. He's sort of Boris but leaded. He does the kind of showbiz but with bigotry. So it's a very powerful right-wing populist right act. It never achieves anything at all, other than taking us out of the EU, which you could argue is a big thing. But it does. But it is consequential, and it could well draw disaffected Tories out of the party. I'm prepared to believe that. Although I do still think, don't underestimate the fact the Conservative Party, whatever the situation it's in at the moment, has a bloody big majority, and one that would take a huge amount to overturn. And as much as individual Tories will be worried about their seats, their individual seats, they'll be looking at that whole and thinking, what's the best way of keeping the Conservatives in power in 2024? Going for 19 years in power, it really is defying political gravity. This is unknown terrain, really, in modern politics.
Thanks, Matt. Just so everybody knows, we are definitely going to do sport predictions. I'm not, but other people are. And so if you're that way inclined, then please get ready with your sport predictions. But before we do that, I'd like to talk about America and American politics. James mentioned this sort of possibility of a Meghan Markle goes to Iowa and then denies it, and people come. I think there's a sort of broadly, Giles Whittell has also sent me some predictions that the Democrats will lose the House, the Senate, and it's not going to go well in the midterms. Penny, you wanted to talk about America too. Just set the scene for what you see happening there, and we'll kick the tires on that a little bit.
Yes, I've sort of tried to come up with a phrase that I felt encapsulated America's situation in 2022. And I came up with this idea that it's the great American meltdown. And that's through the whole of America. It's finance, it's politics, it's every which way you care to look at it. And my reasoning behind this is twofold. When America was founded in 1776, independent America, Pluto was at a certain point. Pluto takes 248 years to go around the chart, so it's back to where it began. And whenever you get this kind of return, you get the idea of total transformation, you get elimination and rebuilding. So if we look at that through the economy, we look at it through politics, we can see that everything gets rewritten somehow, including the Constitution, or at least we're on the way to doing that. It may take a couple of years, but it's really, really going to start in 2022, and probably quite soon, right? And we're going to have to wait a long time before we start to see real trouble brewing here. The other thing is that there's another parallel thing happening with another planet called Neptune. And the last time this was in play, we're looking back at 1860, we're looking at the election of Abraham Lincoln. Now, he was elected on an anti-slavery platform. 5 months later, after he was elected, the Civil War broke out. And so America was deeply divided, North and South, and we all know what happened. So we had the same setup again. And of course, it began in 2020 with a very unpopular, well, not an unpopular win, a very divisive win for Joe Biden. So this is still rumbling on. I think over half the country believe he's an illegitimate president. Mm-hmm. So this is going to rumble on, and the Republican Party, the Democrats, both of them are also divided. So by the time we get to the midterms, there is really, I mean, it's a very difficult patch of the year when the midterms come. Right on the day, there are things that I'm looking at which you would expect to be really, really explosive. So, you know, that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to dominate the proceedings, but these two factors alone, especially finance, people are predicting, financiers are predicting a boom year for America. A lot of people think American, you know, the markets are just going to continue to rise. Well, I don't think it looks like that from an astrological perspective. And I think a lot of things, as I said, the great American meltdown from my point of view.
Fascinating, Penny. Thanks so much. Can we hear from Giles, if Giles Rattel is there?
Hello.
Hi, Giles. Nice to hear you. How you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Tell us about America.
Well, I defer to Penny on the big picture. You can't get bigger than Neptune. Well, you can, there's Jupiter, but the Republicans only need to flip 5 seats in the lower house to take the lower house. They only need to flip 1 to take the Senate. They're very gung-ho about their prospects of doing so. The economic recovery is slow and unequal. COVID is sticking around like an unwanted guest. 10 years ago, or should I say 12 years ago, the midterms that I covered when Obama had been in power in the White House for 2 years, he got the famous shellacking, despite the fact that he was young, dynamic, full of ideas. He had a very bruising time trying to get healthcare through. Biden's equivalent is his Build Back Better bill, which still remains stuck in Congress. And if it ever passes, will do so in a very diluted form, a less impressive number, thanks to Joe Manchin saying he won't vote for a very big spending package. As we all know now, as sort of amateur American political strategists, the governing party always does badly in the midterms, and there's very, very slim margins to overturn, so they will be overturned, and that's why I said they'll lose both houses.
I'm just noticing Samantha Fiona said that she thinks Nancy Pelosi will step down. There have been suggestions that Kamala Harris won't step up and be the candidate in 2024. What do you think about the succession plan, and who's going to run for the Republicans?
Against Trump?
Or, well, I suppose that may be against Trump, or will it just...
well, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is almost the only Republican who I think has dared let it be known that he might challenge Trump for 2024. the received wisdom seems to be that if Trump wants the nomination, it's his to lose. On the Democratic side, as James pointed out, it's extremely rare for the incumbent to get a challenge from his own party. It's rare and embarrassing for the vice president not to be the next nominee, whatever party. I mean, there was this, I don't know Kamala Harris personally. She seemed to be an extremely plausible VP and in fact a plausible presidential candidate, but started by the normally progressive and increasingly left-leaning, well, not increasingly left-leaning, but started by CNN. There was a media pylon about 6 months ago, basically saying, in effect, giving the party plenty of time to find alternatives. The pylon said, multiple sources, she ain't up to it. So in her, instead, names that you can fling around include Buttigieg, who is now at the Department of Transport, John Ossoff, an extremely telegenic and articulate, now actually senior senator from Georgia. And I liked Zab's suggestion of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but he's having, I didn't know DeSantis was having some sort of crisis. I see that in the chat. Zab, am I right that if Johnson ran, it would be as a sort of Schwarzenegger-style Republican, like it wouldn't be as a Democrat? And then there's Matthew McConaughey from Texas.
Is it possible, Matthew McConaughey? Really?
Conceivable, but I have to admit that's just a half-read suggestion from a long time ago.
That will be a reconnaissance and a half. Zav, are you there?
I am. Hello.
So I can just see my pal Chris is talking about The Rock doing a show called Young Rock, where he's getting out in front of all of the stories from his life that could be leveled at him were he to run. Why him?
I mean, he is, you know, he's one of those figures who's kind of universally loved. I think he's only ever come out for presidential candidate once, but I think he feels like the kind of person who's kind of, you know, talking about politics in the broadest terms is quite politically engaged. He's kind of said before, you know, words to the effect of, if people want me to run, I'll run. I don't know if he'll do it this time, but I could see that at some points, if situations aligned, he would be one of the kind of least jokey candidates to run at some points.
He's a Republican. He would run on for a Republican Party.
I'm not entirely sure. I think he could definitely run as a Democrat. I mean, I'm not sure who the one presidential candidate he came out for. I'm not sure if that was a Republican or Democrat.
Interesting.
But, you know, yeah, I think in this election, I'd see it as unlikely that he was going to run as a Republican. He'd be making himself very unpopular among a lot of his fans.
Interesting. Zab, who's going to headline Glastonbury?
I have no idea. I mean, it was meant to be Kendrick Lamar a couple of years ago, and I feel Kendrick Lamar is waiting on things like Glastonbury to happen to release an album. So I imagine they'd want him. I'm not sure who else though. Maybe Taylor Swift or someone.
I think there's some suggestion that do we know it's Billie Eilish, or was she going to do it and then it got cancelled? I mean, this just shows how much I know. Phoebe, I know you're in the chat, but I'm going to ask you to multitask. What's the situation with Glastonbury? What do we know?
So I'm not so sure, because so originally it was meant to be Taylor Swift and as Zav said, Kendrick, but because, you know, often the festivals run off albums, but Billie kind of released her album last year, and I also know that she's now doing Coachella because after Travis Scott's concert went spectacularly awfully and clearly, you know, very tragically, then I think he's been taken off the Coachella roster. So it would be odd for both Coachella, I guess, and Glastonbury to have the same people, but it's so hard to know. And also, you know, they still haven't said anything yet on whether or not it will go ahead. But and then Tessa's right, Adele is clearly, you know, post album kind of coming back on it. But you know, they don't tend to do. I know Diana Ross is still meant to do it on the last slot. So
well, we know she's in the country and she's touring, and so the dates kind of slot in for Diana Ross. don't they? So working our way down methodically through the list of things in order of importance, we've done the American presidency, we've done who headlines Glastonbury, then the next thing after that, of course, is Russia. Is Una Farrell there, who has just bravely put a comment in the chat? I think Putin will signal his exit this year. Una, I'd love to know why you think that. Una, are you there? Oh, doesn't look like there's any response, but maybe Giles, go on, you talk to us about Russia. We can't get Una on.
I too would love to know on what grounds Una thinks that. It would be a wonderful thing to hear, a proper big story. I don't agree. What's his name? Who's the great chess master who's also big into Russian politics? Garry Kasparov once said to me that his only way out of the Kremlin is in a coffin. I think two things. What's true is that he's surrounded himself with so many oligarchs, ministers, generals, admirals, hangers-on with a vested interest in his status quo, that he is well placed there. And of course, he's fiddled with the constitution to allow him to stay for the foreseeable. The only other thing that I was going to say on Russia is that I do think you'll see little green men leaking into Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, as we saw them entering Crimea in 2014, in little green men as in uniforms without their names on, so that they cannot be definitively identified as Russian troops, so that he doesn't have to withdraw so many troops with nothing to show for it. But equally, it won't be a full-on invasion. That's my prediction, because Ukraine's a heck of a big country. And even though he lays claim to the eastern part of it, most of the country wants no part of being another Russian outpost, and it would be an enormously costly operation economically, never mind the politics of it.
But Giles, we've not talked about China yet. Let's talk about China, and let's talk about the Olympics, because there's a Venn diagram there.
And I'm no China expert, but I do think that they showed in 2008 that even in the teeth of generations of human rights abuses and completely legitimate criticisms of the way they run the country, they could put on a heck of a party. They will do so again. They will make the snow if they have to. They will freeze everything electrically if they have to. I see a prediction of shots fired in Taiwan. And it'll be a great show. And have you seen, by the way, I'm a closet, like Emily is a non-closet Olympics fan. I watch a lot of winter sports on Eurosport, and the Chinese are just all over the sort of gymnastic winter events. You might expect it, but they obviously just sort of, they are flooding the zone with skiing aerials, people with moguls, skiers, all the stuff that you can practice in a gym. They're gonna run away with medals in events you never knew they'd even heard of.
Really?
Yeah.
You think somebody mentioned to me that they don't think it's going to be popular, like it's not going to be well watched, the Winter Olympics. I love the Winter Olympics, I have to say, much more than the Summer Olympics. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think in brute numbers, the summer always gets more, but the winter it has more surprises, doesn't it? I mean, it's got the Nordic biathlon, for heaven's sake. You know, yeah. It's got curling. Yeah. It's got the toboggan run on a tin tray.
On the big humps all down in the line.
Yeah, and all those new events. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, parallel slalom, 5 snowboarders wiping each other out. Yeah. Yeah, it's tremendous fun.
I think, again, based on the enthusiasm for the Olympics in the chat, I think that we don't need to worry about the viewership of the Olympics. I want to come to Emily Ben. She's just asked me to wait 2 minutes while she puts some makeup on, but I don't really...
No, Liz. Hello.
Tell us about the Olympics. Who's going to win? Who's going to be top of the medals table? Is it going to be China at the top?
Well, possible, but unlikely. Last medal table, the winners were Norway and Germany, who got 14 gold medals each, followed by Canada, a big year for Canada that in 2018, because they overtaked the USA, you only got 9 gold medals. So,
are we only good at the Winter Olympics? We UK. Team GB rather.
We have got better. We won 5 medals last time, if I remember correctly. We defended our women, skeleton races as the tea tray down the ice.
Yes.
We won 3 gold medals of that in a row. Lizzie Arnold was a double Olympic champion, so it is quite something. And curling, as Mark suggested, mainly I have to say thanks to our Scottish athletes, are pretty good. So if I had I'm going to be very boring and say that Norway will be the top of the medal table this time too.
Huge year for Norway, because Mark St Andrew predicts that Norway will also win. Mark St Andrew.
I think Norway are going to win the Eurovision Song Contest.
There you go.
Whoa!
Best at Olympics and best at Eurovision. What a year. Unbelievable. We're doing thought now. We're probably in the thick of it. Andrew Butler and probably Dave Taylor and anybody else wants to. I can see Age Clulo has just put in some predictions for sport. Go on, Andrew. You've got some quite serious sporting predictions, and I'm hoping some sillier ones also.
Just to add on the Winter Olympics, look out for Charlotte Banks in the snowboard cross, which is the best sport at the Winter Olympics. It's like the snowboard racing one where they go down in groups of 4 and there's always like minor crashes, and she's like a superstar and has won a couple of World Cups, so she actually might win gold as well, so look out for her.
Who's going to win the World Cup?
She's won like snowboard cross World Cups. So
no, the World Cup of football, men's
football. The men's World Cup of
is it the women's Euros and the men's world? Is that the thing of football?
Yeah, so here's my prediction. England are going to do the double. The women will win the women's Euros and the men will win the men's World Cup. Yeah. And the women's Euros is being held in this country. It's going to be brilliant for many reasons. Women's football is on the up in this country. It's such a brilliant environment to watch football in. There's still a few tickets available. I've got tickets to the final, which is at Wembley. That's going to be amazing. And then the Men's World Cup in Qatar.
The Women's Euros is in the summertime, like a normal football thing would be, but the Men's World Cup, because it's in Qatar, is in the winter.
Yeah, which is so interesting. So we probably won't get onto why Qatar probably shouldn't have the World Cup for a couple of reasons. But England winning the World Cup is not so much a prediction from me, but also from Gary Lineker, who told a couple of us at Tortoise that England have got to win something with this group of players. But it's in the winter, and it starts at on November the 22nd, I believe. And this is just the fantasy. The ultimate fantasy of this year is that England win the World Cup on December the 18th. That's when the World Cup final is. And you can't tell me that that's not the ultimate Christmas. England win the World Cup, and then we've got Christmas week afterwards. That's dream territory.
Your eyes are sparkling. I think you might cry. The very thought of it is just too much.
I mean, it is too much for me to think about. I would certainly cry if we do win.
So much women to win in the summertime. I think that'd be completely awesome. That'd be amazing. Andrew, give us a couple of others. Quick.
So I think Novak Djokovic will win his 21st title, but I also think that there'll be this raft of like what I would dub the great retirement. So we've been living in like a golden age of sport in different realms. I think one of Messi or now Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo will retire. I think Jimmy Anderson might retire from cricket. I think Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal will retire as well this year. And I think Lewis Hamilton will win his 8th title in the Formula One and then retire as well.
Okay, interesting. Louise Simpson is very much a no on the Djokovic prediction. Zverev and Medvedev, I know Louise has put in as well, on the tennis side of things. I'm really interested to go back. I know I'm jumping back a little bit in the chat, but I missed out space, and I'd quite like to go back to the people talking about space. So Anushka, are you there? Anushka Sharma.
Hiya, Happy New Year.
Lovely to see you.
Love you too. You can see my astronaut in the background.
You got from space.
Yeah, so we saw so much happening for commercial space last year and really kicking off this space tourism and the space race between the billionaires and who got to space first and who crossed the Kármán line, which really denotes whether you're technically an astronaut or not. I think we'll start to see much more definition in how we classify space tourists as participants rather than crude space astronauts, which is interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see celebrities or actors accessing space. We had the first Russian cosmonauts which filmed a film for the first time in space last year, and they actually beat Tom Cruise to space, where he was supposedly going to go to the International Space Station, but then later we heard that it might be with SpaceX. So I think that that's going to be one of the things we'll see, like actors and celebs racing to get into space. But I think that might do a little bit of a disservice, because what we want to do is make space as accessible for everyone as possible. So hopefully we'll see much more with citizens that are raising the profile for like issues on our planet, looking at what's the word, like injustices and things like that. So that's my aspiration for space this year.
Is Tessa Murray right that this year will be the year that we find life?
We could potentially, like what last year, the atmosphere of Venus had evidence of microbes in the atmosphere because there's a gas that's released. If we get some more data back from Venus, we could have even more, science-backed evidence leaning towards that. Equally, if you haven't seen Don't Look Up, I love that film. It was very thought-provoking, but we are about to go into a portion of the galaxy where we are going to have many more near Earth orbiting asteroids that are very much more likely to be on a collision course with our planet. So last year, NASA launched a rocket with a deterrent that would potentially nudge an asteroid or a near Earth object out of the way of our planet and change its trajectory. So science fiction and science and space, like it's kind of a really weird time at the moment. But I've had people laugh in my face for talking about stuff like this for the past decade, so I'm used to it. So yeah, who knows? Everything is up there. We don't know.
Thanks so much, Niska. It's lovely to see you. I'm mindful that given how much of our sort of airwaves was towards the end of last year, particularly, we spent talking about COP and climate and everything else. We can't not talk about that. So if you want to weigh in on predictions for COP in Cairo at the back end of the year, specific moves in the climate space, I'd love to hear those. But I see that Lynn has had a little yellow hand up for some time, Lynn Stagg. So let's hear what Lynn has to say. Hi, it's nice to see you, Lynn. Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much.
And daffodils. Is it daffodils or yellow blossom or something?
It's blossom from a visit I made to Costa Rica some years ago.
Lovely.
It's just cheering me up. No, my prediction was for the Women's Euros for Spain to win. Mainly because I've got tickets to a couple of their matches.
That's a terrible turncoat.
But also because I think they will, and it's between Germany, Denmark, and Spain, I think. And I'm not quite sure what England will be doing, England women, but that was my only prediction for next year, because some of it's so gloomy that I can't possibly think about it.
Yes, I know, that's the thing. Okay, so Lynn's gone Spain for the women's football. Let's bring in Louise Simpson, who has boldly put Cairo will achieve far more than useless Glasgow in relation to COP. Louise, why do you feel more hopeful for Cairo than for Glasgow?
Well, because I feel Egypt is a sort of proper country. So, I mean, it's slightly a childish thing to say, but I think Glasgow pretty much achieved nothing. And I think, the fact that Glasgow achieved nothing is going to spur people on to achieve far more. And I hope Egypt will pull it off. I did also predict that they'd win the World football thing with Mo Salah. So I might be a bit pro-Egypt.
So it's more a hope than a prediction in some ways.
Oh God, yes. I mean, I know nothing. I mean, I know nothing. I just feel actually the pressure. The pressure is really on. Cairo I think Cairo will pull it off because the world needs it. and and nothing was achieved in Glasgow. So perhaps just because nothing was achieved in Glasgow,
we might have a sort of second time around. John Alexander, you if your connection holds, what do you think is going to happen climate wise?
I think I disagree a bit with Louise. I'm afraid. I think we've entered the post that the era beyond when COPs feel like they mean anything to many people. I think that COP26 is probably the last chance for that. I think if you want a bit of positivity and joy there in this, I think the exciting thing I would be looking at, there was a really fascinating project called the Global Assembly, which is a global citizens assembly, which used like NASA technology to identify 100 citizens at distributed points on the globe to do a citizens assembly in the run up to COP26. And I think there's going to be loads of energy poured into deliberative democracy citizens assemblies on climate in particular. And I just think the protest movement is going to kick off this year, particularly, and I think I can see them levelling their gaze at sports, which I'm talking about. We've got the year of the air-conditioned World Cup and the fake snow Winter Olympics. I think you're going to see Greta and co turn their gaze on international sport and have some fun with that. And these guys are getting some real momentum now. So yeah, I think it's going to be a wild year from a protest and outsider movements perspective, and potentially maturing into some really interesting kind of alternative approaches to government and politics coming through on a global stage even.
Thanks so much, John, and lovely to see you. Tom Schuller is making a sort of important point really to remember. Are you there, Tom, just on this, on the climate protests swing both ways now? And do you really feel like that's going to be something that's kind of will gather a proper head of steam in this country this year?
Yes, I think it is. I think as energy bills go up and people say, well, it's all about China really and India and why should we commit to this deal? I think there's a real danger that there'll be a very savage splits, actually. Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with you. We haven't talked much about the sort of looming economic scenario, but Tessa's just put, I see a poll tax equivalent protest in the UK about the cost of living. If we have a hot summer, why if we have a hot summer, would it not be if we have a very cold winter? Are you there, Tessa?
Because people riot when it's hot, not when it's cold and rainy.
Oh, I see. Because people will go outside and do it then.
Yeah, because you get people hanging around and people are hot and bothered. And it's also, historically revolution comes on the upswing out of the U. So not when things are really, really bad, but just after they've been, sorry, the dog's going nuts. After they've been really bad and they're just looking back, they're sort of not in full dealing mode. And starting to go, hang on a sec, what the hell's just happened? And you combine that with hot weather.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you so much. I didn't tell him I was going to do this, so it is rather unfair of me, because I do want to have a quick chat with Matt as well about cultural predictions and recommendations. But is Luke here, Luke Bedimer? Because we haven't mentioned sort of big tech and techie things. I'm so sorry, I've absolutely given you no warning at all. But last year you did the brilliant prediction, which is about VR, which based on if I get into it, then that means it's mainstream. Yeah. Correct. What do you think are going to be the sort of major things we'll all be sitting in December going, oh wow, that happened?
Yeah, well, I chucked some stuff in the chat earlier, and I think I would stand by it, but as I pressed enter, I thought, could be extremely wrong. But the two things that were tech related were the first was about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies at large. And I sort of feel like this will be the year in which the reckoning around its regulatory and legal status takes place. And mostly that we'll see, particularly in the US, just a massive explosion in the formalization of the use of cryptocurrencies to pay staff, to remunerate other people who aren't staff, but athletes and even politicians, I think is a real possibility. So institutional uptake of payments using cryptocurrencies. And to the first point, I think that's going to really help the defense of cryptocurrencies and blockchain tokens as an institution in society, what won't happen is that all of its detractors will just suddenly grow quiet and go away. I think it will be a massive argument to be had throughout the year. I wrote something about Tesla and then I deleted it because the prediction was that Tesla would see its last really fantastic year of market performance. And I spoke to some people earlier for Tech States, and they were talking about NIO and about existing car manufacturers and lots of incumbents who they thought 2022 is the year that everybody else is going to come to play in EVs. And what's made Tesla look really special up until now will not look so special anymore. I think it could take more than a year, but that's like that's a real guess. And the last thing was about esports. And I think this will be the year that esports beats tennis to become the fourth most viewed sporting thing that humans pay attention to. Second to cricket and soccer, obviously, and perhaps even third. I don't know, but it'll top 1 billion. I'll say that.
Interesting. Good. I felt like I got value for money from Luke's rapid fire tech predictions, and there's going to be tons we're not going to have time for, but I do just want to squeeze in a bit more Matt d'Ancona at the end, because we've not really done, I mean, we did a bit of fun Glastonbury in the middle, but culturally, Matt, what do you think is going to be important this year?
Well, loads of things, and kind of the Glastonbury question is symbolic of so much else, because we hope that this is the end of the great trough that culture has been in, performance culture has been in for 2 years. I mean, other things I think that will happen, I think Nadine Dorries, who's one of the hundreds of people I mentioned earlier that think she's going to be Prime Minister, will announce or try to announce the end of the license fee for the BBC this year. The BBC's license fee has to be reset for 5 years this year. And I think that she will try and arrange it so that's the last, or provisionally the last time the license fee as presently configured is set. I also think on a happier note, I think that print book sales will increase in sales for the 3rd year in a row. It was one of the features of 2020 and 2021 that books, to many people's surprise, picked up in sales quite dramatically for the first time really since the crash. And ringing around publishers in the last week or so, the pre-orders for this year are even higher. So it looks like the printed book is here to stay, which is really good news.
Matt, do you think James is right about privatising Channel 4 and this year will
Yes, yeah, no, I do. I think I agree totally with James on that. I think that it's just a matter of time. Very, very sadly, but I think it is true.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt. Happy news about rising book sales. I know I'm old-fashioned, but I just think that's a good thing. This has been absolutely brilliant, and thank you so much for the generosity and indeed bravery and boldness of everybody who's joined in the chat with their predictions. I think what we must do a better job of this year than we did last year is properly and painstakingly gather together everything we've heard on screen and everything we've seen in the chat. We'll make a really big long list, and then we can do a proper job of ticking them off as we go. I've really enjoyed it, and I feel like we could definitely do, there's certainly an appetite for talking more about space in other think-ins. That's definitely a thing. There's more that we could have said with crypto and blockchain and NFTs and the possible 4 trillion valuation of Apple that kind of pinged up at the end. And we didn't do very much in the way of silly celebrity stuff, but there's always an appetite to talk about that. And there was tons more that we could have arguably should have said about COP and about climate. Thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed it. Tomorrow we're going to, I mean, the whole week really, we're sort of doing a bit of a sensible look ahead, but we're taking a more focused view. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the monarchy again, and particularly the changing role of Camilla over the course of the next 12 months and trying to think through what that means. On Thursday, we're going to be doing a proper deep dive into the Republican Party specifically and the American elections, and we called it Trump's path back to power, whether there is one, who will stand in his way, and so on and so forth. Wednesday is our open news meeting at 6:30 now. That's moved from Tuesday to a Wednesday. We're going to be talking about largely the podcast, the Slow Newscast, which went live this morning on Griffiths versus Griffiths, and the family courts and privacy and abuse within marriage, and indeed abusive men in public life. And I think that's it for the run of the week. Please do join us. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of the evening, and we'll see you again real soon. Happy 2022, everybody. All the very best. And of course, a big thank you to Penny and Marie for joining us. Thank you so much. Bye.